Thank you. That takes us to item number 3 on tonight's agenda, public participation. This is an opportunity for the public to address the board. All we ask is that you come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. Would anyone like to address the board under public participation? Seeing none, we will move on to item number 4, additional budget session with maintenance. And I would invite our Director of Maintenance to the table, Mr. Tom Tuso. At our last meeting, there was a request from Board Member Schneider if it would be possible to have Mr. Tuso available to answer some final questions before the board enters its deliberations. There's some feedback. And so, with that, Mr. Schneider, I guess I'll turn the floor to you so that we can address any open items that you'd like addressed.
Sure. I had, if I remember correctly, I had 2 questions that were there. Is that what you got for me, was 2 questions?
Yes, I do.
Okay, cool. It's a quiz. It's
yeah.
Trying to get into the flow here. The first question was around the track. Now, we've talked a lot about the track, about 6-lane versus 8-lane. Last week we talked about the different scenarios and things. If the board decided to take an approach where we didn't want to put the track in this year's budget, but we needed to budget money to sort of handle, I don't want to call it worst case, but a prudent amount of money to be able to maintain the track for an additional year. I had a question of what amount would you, knowing what you know, feel comfortable with us adding to the budget above and beyond what's already there to handle sort of a worst case scenario for the track?
What I did is I had a conversation with our track person now, and the figure that came up to us was roughly $10,000. We felt that that would be an adequate number to address the needs that need to happen between now and if we decide to delay it by a year. If you wanted to, my personal thought was we could go as high as 15 to make sure that we had an additional little bit of cushion in there, but he was comfortable with the number of 10.
Okay. I guess that was a straightforward question that way, so that's good. So now we have the sort of low and the high end.
Mm-hmm.
The other question I had was, when we talk, at least it's my intent when we talk in deliberations about some of the proposals that were made, and in particular, when you talk about the heat wheel, which fortunately is not running tonight so we can hear each other think. If we make a proposal to move that to the next budget year, we as school board members need to be responsible with our intent for the CIP. And if you look at things that are in the CIP that we haven't talked about recently, the 2 paving projects that are in that next budget year, I think the bus loop and then one of the ferry schools, I guess, is there. So the question that I had was, if from a CIP perspective, we as a board chose to move those 2 paving projects out to I think it's 17, 18. Right now they're in 16, 17, right? And the idea would be is if we as a board wanted to move them to 17, 18, what would the impacts be if we were to do that?
The best way to answer that question is look at it where we are right now. And right now, what I see is the school that we're talking about in question would be Thornton's Ferry School. Approximately 3 years, we did a number of repairs on that school. And at this point, aesthetically, it's not one of the most appealing repairs, but it has lasted pretty well, and I think it served us well. I do not see any problem pushing it out at Thornton's Ferry for that additional year. When we come back to the other sections that we talked about is the high school loop, and I would also consider it as the high school loop with Agera in that situation. The loop looks good to me right now, and I'm a little concerned at this point about Agera. But even if we put it in 17 or 18, or we leave it in 16, 17, I think we need to do some repairs this summer to it. With the repairs, I would anticipate that we will be okay to push it out if that's your decision.
And are those is the money for those repairs, is that part of the proposed budget that we're talking about now?
It's in my budget at this point.
Okay, great. So there's nothing incremental. You believe that the already anticipated repairs should be okay to carry us through should we decide to move it out by 1 year.
Correct, without,
Right.
giving information, yes.
Okay. So I think those were the two that I had questions for Tom, myself, so.
Okay. And just to clarify, I think Board Member Schneider is doing a responsible thing. It's clear in his analysis. He's been looking at what the impacts of decisions this year might be in future years and what those impacts may be. The CIP being an important planning tool for that purpose. As we discuss these things tonight, even though they're informing our decision, we won't be modifying the CIP per se. It's an annual document that we use as a planning tool, as each of the board members has been, but it's one that we undertake annually. We look out into the future, set it in late summer, early fall. As folks may recall, it was most recently approved within the last month by the planning board, and so there's kind of a long cycle on the capital improvement plan as a strategic document. So while we're talking about these things, the intent of perhaps moving something from 1 year to the next is really more from a planning perspective and not as it manifests itself necessarily in the CIP. Does that make sense? We're not ratifying a CIP tonight, is what I'm saying in short. Yes?
Yeah, no, I understand where we are with CIP, but I know that in past years, when I was on the budget committee for years, but also on the school board, that it's very helpful that when the budget committee receives a budget and something in the capital way is moved or relocated, that they get a clear message from the board what their intent is to do with it. Because you hear the expression kicking the can down the road, giving the problem to somebody else. I think it's responsible for us as a board to talk openly about the impacts this will have so that we do it very responsibly. So you said it correctly, but I just want to make sure that's one of the benefits of being on budget committee and school board. You sort of on the receiving end as well as the throwing end. So that's the reason I wanted to talk carefully about this.
Wonderful. And so I think as our liaison to the budget committee and former chair of that committee, I think Ms. Guglielmi will do an excellent job in representing the board's thinking as it relates to any decisions that we make tonight. Are there any further questions for Mr. Tuso before we excuse him for the evening? Ms. Barnes.
As Andy was going down the road regarding paving, I guess the question I also have is with Reed's Ferry, roofing kind of falls into that same amount, $50,000 swing, but roofing at Reed's Ferry, is that mission critical for 16-17 on the CIP? Or could that also be one of the moving factors?
I think one of the things we do with roofing is constantly obsess what's happening. So twice a year we take the walk around, as I call it, and look, at this point in time, 16-17 does not, it doesn't seem vital today that it would stay in that slot, but with that said, I don't know what other types of movement we might see within the roofing projects themselves also.
Gotcha. No, and the reason I'm asking is because you said that, we may get benefit from this repair, but we may not. So is there a plan B, and would roofing be considered a viable plan B? So that's really where my line of questioning is going. So you've answered that succinctly, so thanks.
Mr. Schneider.
Well, considering I usually don't hold back when I ask, if you could only do paving projects or roofing in 17-18 or 16-17,
16.
which do you think is the more important task to undertake?
As we stand today, I would probably put the 16-17 roofing ahead.
So moving the paving out is less of a risk than the roof, mostly because of the impact the leaking roof could potentially
I would
have.
think so, yes.
Right. Okay. That's fair.
Great. Any further questions? Mr. Schneider.
So one of the things that we requested, that I believe both Cinda and I requested, was a breakout of some of the items that were in the high school budget around athletic. And they sort of crisscross into your space a little bit. And I'm not sure if you've been made aware of what we asked for, but there are things on this list that were, and I apologize, I probably should have asked this ahead of time today, but I wasn't able to do it. There are items that the athletic director has placed as high and then moderate. But under the high stuff, one of the things that's probably one of the biggest expenditures is around the goalposts. Now, I don't know if you have any experience with the repairs that were made to the goalposts and the state of the goalposts, because I guess Tim Goodrich did a paint job within the last year and stuff, and the athletic director said he wasn't sure of the state of the goalposts, the structural or anything like that. Do you have any knowledge about those based on what you know?
Yes, I do. It has undergone repairs in last year, basically re-scraping it and painting it. It does have significant rust on it, and it is probably, at this point, seen its better days. Would I say that it's unsafe at this time? Absolutely not. Do I think that it's rusting and there's probably a good layer of rust underneath some of that paint? Yes. So I am aware of some of his requests, and that certainly sounds like a valid request to me at some point to address the issue about the goalpost.
Right, because in his categorization, he has high and moderate in terms of priority, and that falls into the bucket that he calls high. So, but I just wanted to get an idea. I mean, one of the things that he put in when he verbally talked to us last week is that if we decided to remove the goalposts in the budget, he'd want to have a structural engineer or somebody evaluate the integrity of the goalposts. And I'm just trying to figure out if you would, based on your knowledge, that's all.
I can understand his concern because they've been in, they certainly are rusted, and probably would like someone to take a look at it because you see things in the news and stuff that might happen you really wouldn't think it would happen. So he probably does have a valid point that it should be taken a look at.
That's it, thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Tuso? Okay, seeing none, I will thank Mr. Tuso for coming tonight to answer those last few questions that the board had to further inform us for our deliberations.
Thank you.
So with that, we'll move to item number 5 on tonight's agenda, budget adjustments. As folks know, we received from administration a proposed operating budget for the 2015-2016 school year of $71,252,545 with a default operating budget of $71,005,000 or $5,822. Additionally, the board asked administration to go back and find additional reductions to that proposed $71.2 million budget. And the board was provided with a list of roughly, well, I won't say roughly, I'll say exactly, $1,141,622 in potential reductions to the budget, which were prioritized into 5 groupings, which we're calling tiers 1 through 5. So what I would like to do now is to open up to the board to make any amendments to the proposed operating budget for 2015-2016, either in the increase or decrease category. And I think what would be important is, even as we talk about the tiers, 1 through 5, if we're going to reference those, that when we speak to our motions, we talk about the individual items contained in them and the amounts. Is there a procedural question? Or, yes, okay, Vice Chair Barnes.
In Tier 1, you look at the total credit for retirees as multiple line items. So I don't necessarily feel, and maybe I missed something, that we have each line item broken out.
I think when we talk about a light item such as that, we can simply state that we're talking about all of the associated line items, salary, FICA, pension, et cetera, and the appropriate reductions, right? They weren't provided to us, so we don't have them.
Right, and the same will go for, on page 4, the computer technician position. Looks like it was costed amongst a number of facilities.
Right.
So we'll have to do the same thing.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Good clarification. Mr. Schneider,
Are you ready for an initial motion, or are you still procedural?
I will answer any additional procedural questions first, and if there are none, we'll open it up for motions. Are there any other procedural questions? Seeing none, I believe you have a motion.
Do you have a procedural question?
Go ahead, Mr. Schneider.
So, I think the cleanest way for us to do this is, if we're going to approach tiers, that we approach the tiers one at a time and not batch them together. Just start that. So my initial proposal is that we as a board eliminate the items that are referenced in Tier 1, which has a subtotal of $761,623 to remove from the budget.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion made by Mr. Powell and now
I just ask a procedural question?
No.
I thought I closed that.
Well, no,
I'm kidding.
you did, but what
I'm
I
kidding.
heard you
I'm kidding.
say was that instead of just saying Tier 1, we need to go,
So now
And
Mr.
list each
Schneider
one.
will speak to the motion and I
Thank
hope
you.
address the various items in Tier 1. Good question. Thank you.
Thank you. So I wanted to sort of take this as the entire tier to try to see if we can, if we reach agreement, at least from the initial tier. So Tier 1, as I mentioned, has a total amount to be, that would eliminate from the budget a total of $761,623. There are 5 items that are listed in here that I'll identify so that folks know what it is that we're talking about. The first item is from budget 100.4600.62.8451.08. It is the, under repairs district-wide, it is the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system for the high school, straight above our heads, and it has an amount of $500,000. The idea would be move that out of this year's budget, which also it resides in the capital, the capital improvement plan. That's the reason I started my earlier discussion. Additionally, item number 100-2620-40-8622.04. It's under the category maintenance, utility, electrical, superintendent's office. It's an amount of $1,000. It was apparently a clerical error in the budget book, so remove that. The third item in Tier 1 is multiple line items, as Board Member Barnes just referenced. It is the total credit for retirees, including all benefits, of an amount of $216,448. It's a refinement in the calculation of the retirement costs for the retirement benefits. The fourth item in the list is item number 100.2329.41.8730.06 under the category of special education additional equipment, specifically air conditioning units. These are the portable unit, or the split units that were requested to be put in, replacing existing portable units, which are now moved between buildings. The amount of that is $20,000. And the final item is 100-2320.00.8430.04, contracted services superintendent's office. This is category called the online parent registration system for $21,175, and emergency calling system savings of $3,000. The parent registration system will continue to be done for another year, as it was in the past, as we described last week with the cards. And apparently there's a new vendor that's going to save us $3,000 for the emergency calling system. So that item, which is actually has 2 sub-items for that number, has a total of $24,175 between those two. So that's that's the details. That's what you wanted me to cover, the details of what it was. My reason for making the motion is I feel that these items here were offered up by administration as being the initial pass to help us get down. It's obviously got the big heavy hitter for the heating, for the air conditioning system, for the heat wheel, as we discussed in a previous meeting with Mr. Tussaud. He described that it could last an additional year. He didn't think there was a problem. We had questions about preparing the roof when the roof is done to prepare it for the following year's replacement of that, and he said it could be done. And then the additional units based on administration's prioritization seem to be things that they could put off this year and be able to function fine. And so that's the reason for my motion.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Ms. Gualiumi?
I think I'm in agreement with most of those items. The one item I wanted to have a little bit more discussion about is the online parent registration system that we spoke about last week. So in our discussion, if I recall correctly, we felt that it would almost pay for itself, that there were so many operational efficiencies. So I would be more apt to support that if the online parent registration system was not included in that reduction of Tier 1.
Okay. Further discussion. Vice Chair Barnes.
I'm in complete agreement, and had I got the floor first, I would have said the exact same thing. The other thing I like about this online parent registration system is that it's going to get the data into the hands of the administrators and usable more quickly because it's being done without the lag that manual transcription does and with the accuracy that manual transcription doesn't provide, because as you know, we all know we can read our handwriting best, but we're asking people to read 3,000 cards, 6,400 cards because it's done twice. So I think the opportunity for error has always been there. I'd rather just get it done right the first time. As I said, I think it does pay for itself, and I'd be more supportive of a motion that took $21,175 out of that total in order to restore the online parent registration system.
Thank you. Mr. Powell.
In that same group of contracted services, Matt, can you explain the $3,000 for the emergency calling savings? Are we spending $3 to save money? I don't quite understand that.
Currently, we're with a vendor called AlertNow. There's a new company that has been in existence for a few years now. They're proven around the state. They perform the same service, and they are just plain less expensive. It's been a very competitive market for those type of notification systems in the last few years, and AlertNow is one of the first, and they've kind of held their prices, and the newer ones have come in, offered the same service, and have kind of undercut them and are more, there's no loss in service or capabilities or anything like that. In fact, it can do more.
So what's the expenditure of $3,000 for then?
No, this is a reduction. Instead of spending 8, we're going to be spending 5.
3,000 less.
We're going to save $3,000 by changing the system.
So AlertNow was put into the budget.
Initially.
And since that time, we have found this
Okay.
mechanism.
I got you.
So it's a savings of 3.
I got you.
Because we're continuously looking for improvements in every area that we can.
Now I totally get it. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Schneider.
So given the discussion, I'm willing to following your procedure, either offer an amendment directly to the to my motion, or we could talk about the amendment first. I mean, because my
So why don't we cut to the chase?
So
I think the most expedient way is, as long as your second, Mr. Powell, is willing to accept your amendment, then you can amend it. Otherwise, we'll have to vote on the motion as made and then
redo it.
Yeah.
So my amendment would be to take the entirety of Tier 1, but remove the online parent registration system at the amount of $21,175, which if...
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
Make it.
I'm still confusing myself.
Sure.
Keep
I wanna make
going,
sure you're
Mr.
comfortable
Schneider.
with this.
Keep going.
Okay. I lost my train of thought. To keep the online parent registration system and remove it from the cut list, which would bring the total amount, instead of 761, 623, it would cause the new amount of Tier 1 to be 740,448, if I did my calculations correctly. This reminds me of the movie Apollo 13, where everybody's checking the gimbal angles. Everybody's scratching to see if the totals are the same. I agree that I mostly put the Tier 1 out there as a discussion. I agree that that was the one thing that I would choose to keep in that bucket based on what the discussion we had, especially with the savings, so.
Okay, so Mr. Powell, would you support a second to the amendment?
I would.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, we will put the motion to a vote. All those in favor of reducing the lines mentioned by Mr. Schneider in the total amount of $740,448 signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion carries 5-0-0. Is there another motion on the table? Vice Chair Barnes.
I move that we accept the Tier 2 cuts less $28,000. So that would bring us to, 90,000. Oops, wow, I'm totally missing that. My apologies. So I had it on a separate piece of paper before. 93 minus 28. $77,493. Sorry. What I wanted to do was.
Okay. Why don't we get a second?
Okay.
Seconded by Ms. Gual. You may
And now we're
now
gonna go
speak
over
to it. Yep.
Okay. The areas that I wanted to talk about was keeping restored the cabinets at MES, because there was talk of water damage, and leaking with facilities within those cabinets. I believe there's a water bubbler that's built in that is causing water damage. And always when you have water damage that goes on, I fear for long-term, continual damage. And then crack sealing and filling. To me, that's something that will prevent a bigger bill that we may not be planning for. So that line item is 100.2620.40.8432.08 on the original cut list at $28,000. I want to keep that restored. The rest of the line items are all related to the establishment of the pre-K program at Thornton's Ferry, and they are as follows. 100.1205.41.8112.06, that's a preschool teacher at half-time. 100.2900.00.8220.00, that's FICA district-wide at $1,474, which brings the total for that position down from the budget, $19,327. The next is for preschool paras. There are two of them at $9,061 each, with the line item 100.1207.41.8114.13. They're each half-time preschool paras. And then their FICA district-wide contributions at $748 apiece. And that line item is 100.2900.00.8220.00. The total for those two half-time para positions being reduced brings another $19,618 off the budget. Furthermore, there's maintenance facilities development at Thornton's Ferry, which involves the playground at $26,866. That line item is 100.4200.40.8730.13. And finally, the additional furniture required at Thornton's Ferry for preschool furniture is 100.1118.18.8733.13 at $11,682. So of the $105,493 that was proposed in Tier 2, taking out the $28,000 for maintenance, that brings us down to $77,493.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Ms. Gualiumi?
Here I go again. I'd be more likely, I agree with most everything that Vice Chair Barnes said as far as those reductions. I would be more comfortable actually this time basically cutting the cabinets, but keeping in the crack filling and sealing for the points that she stated. So I would be more supportive if we increased that amount to $97,493. But as far as the timing for the preschool and for those other cuts, I support those.
Okay, further discussion? Mr. Powell?
Matt, can you tell us exactly what the issue with these cabinets are?
Oh, it's essentially, I don't want to say cosmetic and make it sound like it's something frivolous. There's some delamination going on. Does it pose any kind of safety threats? No. Are the hinges and structural integrity of them there still fine? Yeah, but they are all old and worn, and there's some delamination, just like you would have on a tabletop that you would see in a normal classroom. They're on the doors. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Schneider?
Just so I'm clear, the crack filling and sealing is a pavement thing.
Correct.
So we're not filling cracks and sealing the cabinets. It's pavement crack and sealing,
Yep.
filling and the cabinets. Two separate items within that category. Okay. I would be willing to support a modification to the motion to reflect what Ms. Gayumi offered up.
Okay. Vice Chair Barnes?
Matt, the one thing that had me keeping it in, because I have maybe right here, honestly, was the thought of potential further water damage, because there was a leaking bubbler, and I believe it's continuing to leak, from what I remember hearing. So if you could let me know if we are continuing to deal with water damage issues with those cabinets, or if that was just something that it got damaged and just is cosmetically unappealing at this point.
Oh, that's just a cosmetic thing, and it's just unappealing. Yeah.
Okay. So based on that, I would be willing to amend my motion to restore $20,000. I assume there was a continual potential for leak, and for that reason, I wanted to get it taken care of.
Yeah,
So
no, it's-
when I hear water being where it's not supposed to be, it gets me squirrely.
Yeah,
So-
we don't let it.
Don't
we
make me
stop the
squirrely.
leak. Yeah,
So,
no.
so I'd be glad to amend my motion to only restore crack filling and sealing for $8,000, bringing the total cut amount to $97,493. If my second would be glad to second.
Ms. Gualiumi?
And I second.
And she seconds.
Great.
Okay. Is there further discussion on this item? Okay. Seeing none, we will put the motion to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. The motion carries 5-0-0. And I'm just going to do a quick spot check at this point. To this point, we have made two motions. The first in the amount of $740,448, and the second in the amount of $97,493. And if my calculations are correct, this drops the proposed budget of $71,252,545 to $70,414,604. I see heads nodding.
Yeah, I'm just
Okay.
looking, yeah.
So that's where we stand at this point in terms of the proposed budget. Are there any other amendments or motions, rather? Mr. Schneider?
And so if we wander down into Tier 3, my motion for Tier 3 is not the entirety of Tier 3, but rather my motion is for the first 6 items of Tier 3, which are, loosely stated, which I'll read the details, the first year furniture replacement plan for each of the school buildings. And it stops, and I'll explain, but it retains the cafeteria table replacement at the high school, but removes the first year furniture replacement of just normal process classroom upgrades for the 6 schools. And I'll give the total once we go through that,
Okay.
if somebody seconds.
Is there a second? Ms. Guglielmi seconds. Mr. Schneider.
So while I'm reading this, if somebody could scratch and build a number, that would be cool. So as we know, there are, each of the schools has a multi-year furniture replacement plan that they want to undertake. My understanding is most are beginning this year, this budget year that we're talking about. I think that based on the discussions that we had, with all the different buildings, these are primarily just a process to start replacing furniture. I think that this is one of those where we need to talk as a board about whether we want to delay the start by 1 year or not. So to get things kicked off, I'll read the 6 items. Item number 100.1118.18.8737.11, furniture replacement MES, 50 desks and 25 chairs for the amount of $5,000. These all have the same numbers with the exception of the final 2. The next one ends in .12, reads Ferry furniture replacement, 50 student desks and chairs, 5 teacher chairs, 10 art tables for $11,805. The next one is .13 at Thornton's Ferry with 50 student desks and chairs at the amount of $6,500. .18 is J-Muse furniture replacement, classroom tables, a cafeteria table, and a bookcase for $6,008. Number 21, which is furniture replacement at the middle school, which is lab stools, 103 of them, at $59.74. And the final one is science furniture replacement at the high school for 12 lab stools in the amount of $600. I don't know if somebody added those together or not, but
Yes. The amount is $35,887 by my calculator. Vice Chair Barnes.
This is going to kind of be for you, Marge. I know we were talking about the first of a 5-year plan, and we just closed a 5-year plan. So we always have 5-year plans, correct? It's just what we're doing and the focus of what we're doing with it?
Right. When we spoke with the administration, we said it's much easier for, we felt, the board, and that you liked furniture replacement plans. So rather than just continue on into perpetuity, it was declare that we had completed what we initially set out to do and begin again. So this is to continue to replace the furniture with all the classrooms, but it just seemed to be smarter to say first of 5. And so, correct.
That's fair. And to that end, I feel that there's always going to be a need for replenishing furniture, keeping it strong, and not waiting for it to go too far down the deterioration route. So we're now making it the first of a 6-year plan with nothing getting accomplished. For that reason, I'm really not a fan of this motion in general, respectfully. But it really is because we're always responsible for keeping the facilities in which students are learning at a condition that's favorable. So, you know, I definitely don't think this is the place that I saw it. And actually, I made notes KTC for kicking the can next to all of that, including the one that you did mention being cafeteria tables for the high school, which is the 7th line in that run of furniture replacement. So they're not, to me, they're not one-offs. They're continual, and that's an area where I just don't see us doing any favors long-term, because we're just basically asking the next board to take care of it for us.
Ms. Guglielmi.
I don't know that I necessarily see it all or nothing. You know, I wonder if there's an option to maybe fund some of it or all of it, so we're not completely pushing everything off, but yet we're making some concessions for this budget year. You know, one particular item that does concern me is the Merrimack Middle School, the 103 lab stools. When I was on the budget committee last year, I took a tour as part of the liaison assignments, and the stools were shown to me how they're welded, and there's all sorts of work going on. And at that age group and with that level, it does start to cause me some safety concerns just based on what I saw and basically how much work is actually being put into keeping those stools as long as possible. So those are my thoughts.
Is there any further discussion on the topic? Mr. Schneider?
So as those that have followed me around budget process for many years know, many times I'll put a motion out there to get discussion going to find out. Just people on the budget committee are shaking their head with that. For me, this was, I didn't use the word kicking the can down the road because I try not to use that, but this is one of those where is the savings enough to justify the potential risk? In general, these are replacement of student desks and chairs, but there are art tables mixed in there. There are bookcases built in there. The lab stools, as Cinda's pointed out, that in my mind we have to do at one point or another. I wanted to really propose this to get discussion to find out what the risk factor was that people had. And hearing what Shannon has said and Cinda said, this is maybe one of those motions that if it goes to a vote, I may vote against, even though I made the motion on it. But I wanted to get it out there and discuss it and find out. So that's.
I'm just recalling the motion to nominate you as chair of the Budget Committee that failed by one vote, your own.
You're wrong.
So that doesn't surprise me. I'm not in support of the motion. I think that Ms. Guglielmi is right to point out the condition of the MMS lab stools. And the fact that administration as a group put these on an equal tier, leads me to believe that to make an individual decision of one over the other in this given year is going to require us to do some additional due diligence on this, and I view these as needs. Additionally, when I look at the amount of reductions that we've already made in excess of $800,000, roughly, I said the amount earlier and I've lost it, but two reductions of $740,000 plus and one of $97,000 plus, with a budget down to $70,414,604. I did a quick calculation, and that puts us 2.24% over last year's budget, recognizing that we had roughly $750,000 in increase attributable to both the health care and the pension increases. My feeling is we're starting to cut pretty close to the bone. So that's my take on the motion. Is there any further discussion? Vice Chair Barnes.
So I guess my only question was, Andy, were you looking to vote against it, or were you looking to pull your motion?
I don't want to take a vote away from somebody that may choose to vote for my motion, so I'd rather let it just go through and vote, and that way people can vote as they will.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of removing the $35,887 from the 6 or 7 specified accounts by Mr. Schneider signify by saying aye. This is a first. All those opposed? The motion fails 0-5-0. I do believe this to be a first, at least in my tenure on the board. The motion fails 0-5-0 with Board Member Guglielmi, Board Member Schneider, Board Member Powell, Vice Chair Barnes, and Chair Ortega in opposition. Mr. Schneider.
I don't know. I don't want to make light of this. I mean,
I'm sorry if I did.
No. I know it's. I don't mind people using my name in vain like this, but when you're sitting at the table and you're going through the budget items like this, you have ideas in your head that you're not sure how you feel. And in my mind, the best way is to put them out there, make a motion, get people to discuss them. And sometimes my mind can get changed in the middle, sometimes it may stay the same. So the fact it failed 050 was fine by me, because it got it out there, it discussed it. We all know how we stand on the idea of furniture, and that's what it is. So
I appreciate it.
I just wanted to make
Good point. Thank you.
I don't want people to think that, I mean, I know I'm the way I am, but there was a reason behind it. So.
I appreciate it. Ms. Gualiumi.
No, I just wanted to say that I appreciate Board Member Schneider bringing that up so we could have a discussion about it. I think that really helps us be prudent and responsible as we go through the potential cuts to this year's budget, or the 15-16 budget.
Correct. Thank you. Mr. Powell, you had your hand up?
I was just wanting to move to Tier 4.
Okay, why don't, if you're willing to wait, we can hear from Vice Chair Barnes.
Okay. So, and Andy, even though it was a good exercise, it was still funny, so I'm still gonna laugh at the end of the day. When it comes to Tier 3, I did find 3 areas where I would feel comfortable, because it's one-offs, and it really only comes up to about a little over $6,000, but it's worth vetting and for the sake of discussion, because that's what we do these days. But anyway, the first is actually the last, which is periodicals, library, reduction of newspaper and periodical purchases. I look at that as only losing a small fraction of a larger budget, and I'm also looking at it from, periodicals, a lot of them are online right now. So not having the print copies to me does not quantify as large of a loss. That and our public library actually has databases you can log in and look at a lot of periodicals and the like without any cost to the district. That item is $3,000, and it's 100.2222.36.8646.07. The second was shredder at Reed's Ferry. They'll just continue to borrow the large shredder from the district office on a rotating basis. That's $750, and that is 100.2410.48.8730.12. And the third is the digital piano and cover and dolly for MES. It's $2,259. It's 100.1112.12.8730.11. And that is because it's not that there are no pianos, there's just not a portable digital one with a cover. So it's not that they're going without, they're just not going without this specific area.
Okay, is there are those?
Those are the 3,
Okay.
of the whole tier, those are the 3 I'd be
So is
comfortable
there a
with.
second to the motion made by Mr. Schneider? And would you like to discuss it further?
I pretty much think I have. We haven't taken the piano out of the MES, we just took out a portable one. The shredder is something that's been on a rotating basis, so it's something that's gone through the district and continues to have a cyclical usage, and that really, I don't think, takes us out of the norm. And then finally, the periodicals, as I said, so much of it's available online and is preferred online. So for that reason, I think those 3 things are expendable.
Okay, discussion. Mr. Schneider.
So I'm in full support of the first 2 items that you had for the rationale that you used. The piano is one of the ones that I listened intently when we had the discussion about it. Was it last week?
Yes.
Last week. When I heard that the only piano that elementary school has is the upright that they roll out of the music room and into other things, and I guess the upside and the downside of having kids that were both music majors in college, you understand the sensitivity to anything that's got a soundboard and strings. If we want to use the piano for items such as what were described, such around what Emily described in terms of things that are outside, things that are chorus-based, things that are not located in the music room or centrally, I think we may end up incurring additional costs to tune the piano and potential repairs versus this sort of one-time cost. I actually knowing musical instruments, I looked online, and this is actually a pretty good price for the piano that they're getting, so it's not even an inflated price. So personally, I would support the motion of the first 2 items, but would like to keep the piano in. That's my personal
Okay,
stance.
Ms. Gualiumi.
I agree with Board Member Schneider on that. Last week when we discussed the piano, it was a question that I had about it. It was kind of on my target cut list, if you will. And after listening to the explanation about kind of the portability and the moving and the things that Board Member Schneider mentioned, the tuning and things like that, it started to give me some concern, particularly around, even from a safety standpoint, moving something so bulky through halls where you have young children going up inclines. Someone moves and it rolls down, and I'm sure there's all sorts of careful things that can be done to protect, as it has been, over the years. It was just one more factor that made me think that it may not, that it may be best just left in the budget to support the music education.
Mr. Powell, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I'm curious, what do the other elementary schools do for this situation?
Go ahead.
The Reeves
Superintendent.
Ferry and Thorntons Ferry don't have those inclines. They're all flat surfaces, and they do not have digital pianos. So if they were to move the piano, they would do the same thing. It would have to go from the music room, which are usually located in the far corners, or do recorders or another device. I think what she was saying is this particular teacher is one who uses the piano all the time. And therefore, they have the incline. That is, if you think in terms of where the music room is relative to the Smith Gym,
Sure.
that's the incline, and vice versa. And so she was talking in terms of all of the happenings they have outside, which if you look at the front doors of Master Call Elementary School, that's considered their open area. They do things around the flagpole and so on. So I think it was the consideration of their programming and what they've experienced before. And we've talked about tuning the piano. How many times is it necessary to do that? Is it better to just have a portable device? So I think she thought the timing was right. If you notice, anything that you're seeing in Tier 3, for the most part, other than the furniture replacement, are all additional items. And it's not that we don't think those are viable. We just thought an additional item should go before a replacement item. So it doesn't diminish, the desire for it. It was simply being asked to come up with $1 million.
Okay, thanks.
Vice Chair Barnes.
Based on the dialogue, I'd be willing to amend my motion to only include the first two items totaling a cut of $3,750.
Is the second willing to do that? Mr. Schneider, thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, we'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? 1. That motion carries 4-1-0 with Board Member Powell in opposition. Are there any other motions as it relates to the 2015-2016 budget? Mr. Powell? Oh, did you raise your hand? Oh, okay. Timeout granted.
Sorry. Moving on to Tier 4, I have a clarification question first. About halfway down, we have the athletic equipment replacement for MHS, $6,500. And the description, the impact description leads me to believe that it's for the headsets that they were discussing. Yet on the AD's list that was emailed to us, it said $3,600 and not $6,500. So I'm just curious as to which is correct.
I think that the AD mixed two different categories on his spreadsheet that he sent us, and they're in different places. I think they reflect a replacement and an incremental add on two items in the budget, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
I think I'm going to have to go
Following
with
that. We're going to go to that line in the budget.
Yeah, the one thing I will tell you is the 6,500 represents two lines, though it has just the impact of will inhibit ability of coaches to communicate, which is the wireless coaching headset, but there's some other line item there, and we were having trouble getting the impact on the line, so I'm trying to remember what the
Okay. Okay.
The impact statement.
Would it be the camera? Was that in the?
The limited ability of coaches to communicate with other coaches.
The cameras were $4,400.
Oh.
Yeah, so on page 21, oh, sorry,
Go ahead.
oh, sorry. In my
Anything
own
will
world
help
here.
at this point.
So on page 21, under athletics, additional equipment, MHS, at the top of the page, for $5,100, it says in-zone camera and the padding for the high vault pit. That was the two incremental things that were there.
Okay, and that's 5,100.
And the padding
It's-
is
it's-
$400. No, I'm
it's-
sorry, $700.
It's definitely not that, because if you look at the vault padding up at the top of his sheet, that is required per NHIA. We
Right.
absolutely have to have that, or we
Oh.
can't participate in that particular thing. So that is definitely not the answer.
I think we're just trying to figure out where they were categorized, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
See, I just took everything here that was pumped up and just ability coach. So this coaches. I don't know. This is 2 sets. This is 4 sets. I don't know what it is. But it was headsets. But if he
Okay,
put in a
but
different number in the sheet that he gave out.
Right, we're looking for 65.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Right. That's what I'm talking about.
I haven't looked at my sheets here.
So 65 minus 36. There's $2,900 that's unaccounted for.
$3,600.
Is it possible that when, because as we know, we had a line item where some digits got transposed. Is it possible with the description that exists there that an amount for the goalposts or something was taken as the reduction amount when in fact what was intended were the headsets, if that's what the impact is?
I know that just knowing the descriptor when we were trying to write the impacts, definitely the headsets are definitely a part of it. It's just trying to figure out what that second item is. And
Well, I guess what I'm asking is, are we sure there was, in fact, a second item
I believe there
that
was.
wasn't listed in the impacts?
Just,
Please.
Can I just ask, Board Member Powell, did you have a particular item or items that you were interested in removing? And
Well,
then we would at least be able to maybe do a quick run to the office and look it up or whatever, if I know what it is that you're seeking to remove.
Are we trying to move this tonight?
Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, the Budget Committee meets tomorrow in their first set of hearings, and so we are moving the budget tonight.
the things, if you look at this,
I mean, well, let me ask this. Was it the intent of any other board member to move this tier as a whole?
No, not mine. I'll say for myself, no.
Okay, then I think we're okay with that. My concern was the discrepancy, and if we were to move it as a whole, we're going to have apples and oranges. So I think I'm okay with that. But I do have additional questions on this tier when we do get to that point. So, no, you don't need to run back over to the office and find out.
Okay. Are there any additional motions? Mr.
Well,
Or
no.
comment? Go ahead, Mr.
this is
Schneider.
just a comment. If you, in the budget, under the new items, it's apparent that the padding and the in-zone camera are the two new items. If you add his remaining items that he gave us on the spreadsheet broken out, that figure comes out $1,050 higher than what's reflected in the budget book. So it's possible that an item, the number got transposed, and that 6,500 was addition on a different amount or something. So, but
Okay.
regardless, it's just that's where I think the issue is.
Okay. Are there additional items for the budget? Vice Chair Barnes.
On Tier 3, which has a subtotal at this point of 66,801, I found two definitive cuts I'd like to discuss. So I move that we remove the English Language Arts Supplies, MHS. It's 50 fewer subscriptions to the New York Times Magazine, and reduce instructional aids like video cameras and tripods. The number is 100.1105.05.8610.31. Second is the software licensing library reduction in software for discovery streaming. The consequence is the additional teacher time to find, review, and capture appropriate content. That is 100.2222.36.8650.07. And the total between the two is $9,135.
Is there a second made by Ms. Guglielmi? Would you like to speak to it?
I didn't see anything with these two items that, again, subscriptions to New York Times Magazine, again, an online option I think is probably available to the district. Video cameras and tripods, if, as far as, just having it lumped together, it's hard to take one without the other, but for English class, it doesn't seem mission critical as much as one would think for a videography class, a drama class, that kind of thing. So it didn't look mission critical, and we do have videography programs in the district, so as needed, I'm sure we have materials that could be shared or even cross-promoted between curriculum areas. When it comes to additional teacher time to find, review, and capture appropriate content, I think that's something that, research takes time, and as a teacher, it takes the time it takes to find what you're looking for. So is that having a software at $8,000, I don't know that there's a quick enough ROI for that type of expenditure. So, the information's out there. Software to find it for you is something that I'm not sure is the best use of our resource this year.
Okay. Discussion. Ms. Guglielmi.
Yeah, I was just going to say I agree with those two cuts for the reasons that Vice Chair Barnes stated.
Further discussion. Mr. Schneider.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to now get into the nitty-gritty of things now that we're in, by the way, we're in Tier 4. You said 3, but
It
yeah,
is Tier 4. Yep.
It's in Tier, that's all right. A lot of things in here are based on instruction and other stuff. This, it's on the edge. I mean, I could go either way and support it, but
Further discussion? I would just like to ask, seeing as we have overlooked a number of Tier 3 reductions, a significant number of them, and are now looking at some that are in Tier 4, if either the superintendent or assistant superintendent could talk to the rationale of these two items being in Tier 4 as opposed to higher up in the list, and their instructional relevance and necessity?
So I think the rationale in the tiers was to place things that were related to instruction lower than other things. And so in these cases, they relate to instruction. The question is whether they're, of supreme value or not, but that's the reason for their being placed where they are.
Okay, thank you. I mean, my feeling, based on that explanation, is that I'm not comfortable making them. I mentioned where we were in terms of the budget at this point, and that these being the only items this thus far, or perhaps the beginning of those items where we're going to start to impact instruction in some way, I would not be willing to make those cuts. But I understand the intent, and it's good intent. I'm just not going to go there. Mr. Schneider.
Yeah, fundamentally, I mean, I understand the rationale behind it, but fundamentally in Tier 4, it gets down into, semantics isn't the word, but I mean, it's what's one person's definition of what's required versus not, and I'm sort of, I guess I'm deferring to administration and the buildings that when they put it in this one, that it will be more painful than anything that's above it. And for me, I guess, you know, like I said, I could go either way on it here, but I guess I might be leaning, you know, because of the small amount. I mean, it doesn't save a lot. I know that sounds weird, but, you know, saving, you know, $8,000 off of one line item, but on the other hand, if it affects in the library or in English something that we're not considering, you know, if it, you know, 50 subscriptions to New York Times Magazine, that might be something that an English teacher does as a matter of course as part of their instruction for their class and sends them to the library. And then they need to be able to work with the librarians to be able to get streaming things. I mean, I don't know. I can't say yes or no. And without them here, we can't ask. So I guess based on that, and I'm thinking about it a little bit, I probably won't support just because I just don't have the knowledge for this.
Additional discussion on the motion. Okay, so with that, we'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favor of reducing the two line items mentioned in the total amount of $9,135 signify by saying aye. Those opposed? So the motion carries 3-0 with Board Member Schneider and Chair Ortega in opposition. And so I will ask, are there any other motions as it relates to the budget? Ms. Guagliumi.
I'd like to make a motion to reduce the end zone camera for the football, but I don't see it on this list in either places. Yeah, it's on page 21 of the budget book, and it's $4,400. So I'd like to reduce the budget by $4,400 to remove the end zone camera. The line item is 100-1420-24-8730-31 under the caption of athletics, additional equipment, MHS.
And thank you. Is there a second made by Mr. Powell? Would you like to speak to it, Ms. Guagliumi?
I really was not convinced when we spoke about it last week of the need to do that for just this year as it being a priority. So if it's a strong need that we need for future years, I'd be open to it in the future. But for this year, I'd like to reduce it from the budget.
Okay. Is there additional discussion? Mr. Schneider.
So this was, just so folks understand, this was, the athletic director listed this as a moderate need versus a high need. So this is sort of a second tier in the athletic department. My only question is it talks about they rent a lift and they put somebody on the lift to go up and record. The intent of this camera is to do an automated camera up there, so that, and it's controlled by a laptop. That's the cost of what this is. It says here there's a certain amount of risk liability. From a district perspective, can we quantify that? Is it really a risk liability that we should be worrying about? Is it something that's been done for many years that is normal practice? That is, I mean, I guess if I know none of you may be the right person to ask, but given where we're at,
I've never heard of any issue with it happening using the lift. You're talking end zone camera. You're talking something that's going to be in back there that's going to kind of give you a view as the ball splits the uprights, or you're looking at the play come towards you. I'm assuming if it's one of our lifts, it's not very, very high, and it's something that, you know, is, we use from time to time. If we want to change the light bulbs in the gym, we hire out a contractor, and they use their lift, and they get way up there. So what we have is nothing tall. But
Well,
if
it
you
says
said
it-
there's a
It
rental
said they rent a
fee,
lift for in-zone. Is there something specific that they rent, specific for that purpose?
I've never seen the piece of equipment, so I really can't comment on it, but I've never heard any issue with it either.
I've seen it at the games. I would agree it's not extremely high, like a, you know, a lineman's cherry picker or something. You know, it's a platform. You stand on it, and they film from it. Yeah, yeah. I've seen it. I guess my question is this: is the amount that was budgeted was $4,400 for the camera system. But there's a $900 a year cost for the lift. So if we remove the $4,400, do we not have to put the $900 back in order to pay for the lift? Mr. Powell?
Well, I read that line item as additional equipment, so it wouldn't be appropriate to have the $900 there.
Well, it also wouldn't have been appropriate to include it for the lift
Exactly.
if it was already budgeted.
So where was the money coming from in prior years?
Okay, so
And the reason I ask that question is because the documentation we got says that the cost is $900 per year, that they've been doing this in the past. So obviously
Right.
they've been paying for it somewhere.
had to have been in the budget. Yep.
Exactly. So I don't feel that there's a need to add $900 in for the cost of the lift.
Unless the assumption was we're putting in for new cameras and won't need the lift, and they took reduced a line item by 900, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that
On the
information hasn't
assumption
been
that-
given to us. So
Well, and so I'm asking Mr. Chevenel if he knows the answer to that question.
No, I don't.
Okay,
With any with any
Okay.
confidence.
all right. Vice Chair Barnes.
Well, that being said, and it's a healthy discussion, well, you know, whenever we budget for what we do, if we find that we need to go over in one area, we go under in another. Or we find money that wasn't expended or needed to be expended from other areas. I mean, the line items are there to be supported, so, and it's clearly how it was paid in past years, whatever mysterious line item that was. But, you know, if we reduce by 4,400, well, then they just have to find 900 elsewhere, or, you know, maybe we don't see it because maybe a booster club did it. We don't know enough. So,
Oh, okay.
and maybe a booster club might be the answer for these cameras long-term, that they can do a fundraiser. I mean,
Right.
you know, they're supporting a long-term initiative. They've done things like AEDs for us as well. So
Yep.
I don't think we're not saying they can't have one. They just aren't getting the money for it.
I just wanted to understand how
So,
it was
yeah,
budgeted.
no, but definitely understood.
Mr. Schneider.
I mean, I'm assuming that the whole concept of a lift is to give you point of view in the air. So if you get a remote control camera, you've got to put it on something. So the question is, would they put the camera on the lift, or would they mount a pole? We just don't know, you know, whether that $900 is there regardless, or whether there's another way to get the camera in the air. I mean,
Yeah.
without the athletic director here, we don't know for sure, so.
A
So you're right.
drone?
I don't think
Is that
we
what
can
you're
tie-
thinking? Drone?
Huh?
You can actually have
I-
flybys on the play? Yeah, Skycam.
Well, I have had a demonstration of a drone that Mike Sorelli has that is really neat, that goes up like 500 feet, and it has a camera on it, and you can control it all over the place. He let me play with it one summer afternoon, and it was fantastic. But I don't think it'd be appropriate for this use. But
Liability issues again. Ms.
Quick
Guglielmi.
See if balls are up on the roof, send the drone.
Okay, is there further discussion on this item? Based on the rationale given, I too support this motion. I think, you know, the mention of booster clubs as potential for funding this and existing means for doing the end zone photography make good sense. So we'll put the motion to a vote. All those in favor of removing $4,400 for the purpose of the end zone cameras signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. The motion carries 5-0-0. Mr. Powell.
All right, continuing on with the high school, page 23. Line item 100-1420-24-8739-31, equipment replacement, athletic equipment replacement for the high school. I move that we reduce the proposed budget by $6,400, making the new total $18,100.
Is there a second by Ms. Gualiumi? Go ahead and speak to your motion.
I believe it was Board Member Schneider that asked the question about the goalposts this evening when the maintenance director was here, and Mr. Tussaud told us that he does not feel there's an immediate need for the goalposts to be replaced at this point. I feel it's something that can be budgeted for a year in the future. And as far as the suggestion that the athletic director made regarding recommending they be inspected by trained professionals to ensure the integrity of the poles, I think that would come in under normal building maintenance in some way or fashion, so it'll be taken care of in that way as well.
Okay, further discussion. Mr. Schneider.
Yeah, this is a tricky one. You know, as you can see, I asked the question about the integrity based on what Tom knew, but I'm sure he would not claim he's a goalpost expert. I mean, you don't replace those often. But I would imagine that as part of the process of budgeting, the due diligence like Tom does with track and things like that is that somebody that's knowledgeable would inspect to make sure, so we know exactly where we stand. I believe that if we don't budget this and then they bring somebody in to inspect it and it finds out that there's a liability, then that would fall under the category of emergency, like we did with the bleachers and things like that. So we probably have it covered through that if there's an issue. But frankly, I don't think any of us really know unless somebody were to be brought in. So it's a little bit of a gamble, but would we have the money to repair it if it was deemed unsafe? We would have to do it through another means. So.
Okay. I'm going to go to Ms. Gualiumi because she had her hand up, and then I'll come back to Ms. Barnes.
I would say I second it for the sake of discussion, but I'm not sure I'm entirely comfortable cutting it from the budget. There's enough gray area and enough risk, at least for my eyes, that I'm just not sure if I'm really comfortable. So I don't think I support it.
And Vice Chair Barnes.
And I'll tell you why I do support it. The reason is I'm going back to our CIP, and regardless of what we decide to do, we're going to be having a tangible discussion next year about fields for that specific football field. So with the fields, will we buy goalposts and then pull the goalposts up if we put down a different field? So for that reason, I'd rather we wait a year to have a fully vetted discussion about the entire platform of the football field and have a thorough vetting of what's best overall, because if we decide to change surfaces, if we don't decide to change surfaces, at least we've vetted that part of the equation before we put up goalposts.
Thank you. Mr. Powell.
I just want to wrap it up by saying that we, as a board, are committed to making data-driven decisions, and to be frank with you, I don't have the data to support replacement of the goalpost at this time.
That's fair. Any Ms. Gualiumi.
So we do have a plan B if we have them evaluated and they're deemed not structurally safe. We have a
Well, what's the balance in the emergency
Well,
repair
right now,
capital
there's
reserve
around
fund?
$20,000 left in. But
Right, and we're
Okay.
talking about
about
warrants
warrants
to
to
further increase that. Yep.
So that would be the vehicle. And as far as inspection goes, we have all of our systems inspected. In addition, we have our insurance carrier who covers us go through every piece of this building, looking at things like goalposts and bleachers and all sorts of things. It's extremely thorough, and it's over the course of a week. You'll spend a day in each building, so.
Okay,
if at
and I
that
think
point
that
in
Vice
time-
Chair
yeah.
Barnes made a good point. If we have it inspected and we can deem it safe, particularly while we have people on the field, and it makes sense that it's probably replaced at the time we consider the whole plan. So I'm changing my mind.
The beauty of discussion, as Mr. Schneider pointed out before. So I guess the request that I would have is that when either the insurance inspector or any inspector who has that expertise is around, that we specifically ask for a look at that equipment. So we'll put the motion to a vote. Mr. Powell's motion to reduce the athletic equipment replacement line at MHS by $6,400 from $24,500 down to $18,100, which is 100-1420-24-8739-31. All those in favor of the reduction signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. That motion carries 5-0-0. I will say it again. Are there any motions? I'll go to Vice Chair Barnes.
I don't have line items because they're multiple. I would like to reduce the budget by $79,675, reducing the computer technician position.
Okay. Is there a second? Made by Mr. Schneider. Go ahead, Ms. Barnes.
The reason I'm looking at this is it's $80,000, and we really know that it's a support role for those, according to the impact statement, education technology integrators and librarians will continue to troubleshoot, which encroaches upon their instruction time. I think at this point, we're in the middle of a technology capital improvement plan, so we're putting in improved technology all the time. So as far as troubleshooting technology, I think it's something that we're investing in the machinery so it's lessened. The other thing is I think it would give us time as a board to understand the depth and scope of this role. It's something new to the district. It's a new position. And at this point when we're talking about eliminating teachers, the thought about adding support right now is not where I think my heart is at. My mind is at statistically, because I really don't see the scope of this position, I think, laid out in a full-time role, an $80,000 equivalent. That being said, I think if there's technology that needs addressing, consultants to me are at a fingertip away, a phone call away. We have some that we've called on for a variety of our infrastructures, our servers, our phone systems. I think they may even be the same person I'm talking about. But there's technologists out there in the free market that we can call on to deal with any type of small scale stuff. And once this technology plan is, I guess, upgraded and improved and established and done, where we're just kind of recycling and turning over, I think that's the point where maybe we want to discuss what this role really would be in the long-term need for the district. But right now, I think you see the mission critical part of it, because we have old equipment, but we're working on that. In long-term, I see us not going as long as we've been going with the technology to require such troubleshooting. So for me, it's I'd like to do a wait and see. Not necessarily saying it's a bad idea, but let's just wait and find out what more we can look at this role to do.
Thank you. Discussion? Mr. Schneider.
So this was another difficult one to talk through, because as you add more technology, it does increase the need for expertise to be able to help both, whether they're technology integrators or whether it's the library staff. I mean, the unfortunate part about technology is once you get past the technology integrators, usually the librarians are the ones that are the next on the line. So I understand that this is putting a lot of effort. It's unclear whether the expertise exists with the librarians and the assistants to handle it, because it talks in the summary section about this position that the ETIs, or the education technology integrators are using their time to debug a lot of these problems, probably because of their expertise level. What we don't talk about here is if there is an alternate way to obtain that support as the technology increases. Is there a service that we could identify to help cover, like phone calls or whatever? Because as Shannon did describe, as you increase technology, you have to have a plan to be able to handle it. Now, this may be Director Rose's attempt at the first layer of support to start where she's seeing the sort of the soft belly, if you will, of the situation. So without her here to answer the question and find out what the impact would be, it's a little tricky to be able to decide what it is. This is a new position, just so people understand. Yeah. This is a new position that is not currently budgeted, or has not been budgeted before this proposal. So it's not as though it's a reduction of any side. It's just whether we're adding it or not. So.
Superintendent.
This is a position that I think it's important for all of us to weigh in on. It's the most significant to Nancy Rose, and it's important when we look at the $79,675 to note that the actual calculated salary is $47,000. Then we've put in health insurance, dental insurance, long-term disability, and workers' comp and so on. So it's a complete salary. When we looked at all the positions, Nancy has tracked how inefficient it is for the one technician we have in place now to try and handle all the problems in district. He literally tries to put in a day in a building, and of course it's ridiculous because the high school has more needs, let's say, than the elementary, but they all have needs. We've got teachers that are utilizing technology a lot, and one of the logic model goals is technology integration. So the fact of the matter is we've just come to a point in time where it's considered to be a major need. The elementary principals, when they were together, said this is the most critical need for us. Matt will speak about it from his point of view because he works with Nancy on our technology plan, and I think Mark would talk about it from an instructional point of view. So we as a team, you saw, we put it in Tier 5 over everything else with earth science techs and family and consumer science modules because we consider it so important to what we're attempting to do. And in this particular case, we didn't think it would be helpful to have contracted services. This is a person that we need to have on the scene with the other computer technician overseen by Nancy Rose.
I would just add from the instructional end, the ETIs several years ago, when our technology wasn't as complicated and there wasn't as much of an expectation to integrate technology and instruction, the time that they spent troubleshooting everything from fixing, printer cartridges and toner, they had the time for that. In more recent years, as their expectations have really changed, the goal for the ETIs is classroom instruction two ways. One is their own instruction with students, and the other is integrating technology into the classroom. That's really the role that the state sees for ETIs, and certainly our district does. And in that same amount of time, there has been with more technology, hardware, software in the district, troubleshooting needs have only increased. And so we find that their instruction is significantly impacted, or their instructional role is significantly impacted by those other activities. We have tried to build an internal system. We have, for instance, begun a comprehensive plan to help teachers to understand how they can do troubleshoot things like, fix cartridges and so on, so that some of those tasks, which aren't terribly difficult but take time, can be done at the classroom level. And that is something that Nancy takes seriously and is really continuing to work on. But we're talking about things that are really more complicated and more time-consuming than a simple fix. And in the time it takes to do that, because classroom instruction kind of comes to a halt, if I'm in the classroom and I'm relying on technology to do this particular thing, and whatever the thing is glitches, then the ETI can come, and by the time that gets resolved, the period has passed, or the time frame for the instruction has passed for the day, and they've got to move on. And so I would say that we would all consider that a very significant impact, and Nancy and I have spoken a lot about it, and I've spoken with the ETIs about it as well, and I could say that it's one of the most significant things that we're looking at if we really are serious about trying to meaningfully integrate technology in the classroom.
Is it my turn? Thank you. I have been hoping for this position to come forward in a formal fashion in this budget for the past 5 to 6 years. We are behind in technology integration because we have specialists out there that can work with teachers, show them the software tools that they can use to spice up their class, to integrate it with technology, to motivate their students, because these certified teachers are passing out ink cartridges, because they are fixing paper jams, because they are going around and saying, okay, your computer cord is not plugged into the wall, that's why it doesn't work. That's a shame. We have Mark Merrifield in this district at the high school who was supporting Luda Balanovich, our senior systems computer manager, in Power School and the growth of that, and who will be doing it in any other fashions. He is trying to support us in initiatives, performance pathways, other kind of assessments, and so is Luda also. To have this technician available frees up Mark to work with Luda because they are a team, and frees up our current computer technician to take care of the needs of the district more quickly, more efficiently, and it's just that it's a shame that if this goes by the wayside, that we'll be utilizing people who are paid at a certain scale and have a certain level of expertise that we're just not tapping because we don't have a computer tech. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Mr. Schneider.
So one of the question that I have is, given this is a new position, was any consideration in any of your discussion with Nancy around starting off by making this a part-time position versus a full-time, to start to see how effective it is and whether it solves some of the problems?
I talked about that with Nancy. I don't know if you have Mark. You can chime in. And to try and find some, you want to find the right person. You have to have the right knowledge base. You have to have the right personality. You have to have a lot of things. Getting somebody part-time to do this and to trust them with the certain level of security that they need to have in order to do the job doesn't seem to be an effective use. I remember talking in regards to this about the additional maintenance person. If we could get somebody a few days to come in and cut the grass. Well, it's more than just cutting the grass. It's, taking care of our systems and everything like that, and our buildings that go with it. So a part-time person, I don't believe would fill the need. You would want somebody full-time that's here, that's dedicated, that spends the 8 hours a day, for 8 hours a day, probably for the first 3 months, shadowing our current computer technician to learn every nook and cranny of this building. I don't see that with somebody who is hired on a part-time basis, who is ultimately looking for a full-time job, what level of commitment that person will give us.
I would just say that this is even more significant in my view even than that. The issue is, you know, whether we're going to muddle through or whether we're going to try to excel. And we have a lot of expectations on our teachers to integrate technology. We have an active capital improvement plan. We have an active effort with our library and media folks to develop a new and really contemporary curriculum that integrates technology in a meaningful way. And we have a very vibrant and complex infrastructure for technology. And as I see it, the simple fact is that at the moment, we are woefully unprepared to match that, and that this is a minimal, rather than seeing if at halftime it's a minimal suggestion, because the needs are that great. I mean, this is a case where people are doing the best they can with what they've got, and it is quickly proving insufficient for our goals.
Are you on the same line of questioning, or do you have a follow-up to what was said? Or should I go to Ms. Guglielmi? Okay.
It's a follow-up only. I just want to make sure I'm clear. The description of the position says it is intended to be focusing at the elementary level. Do you anticipate that this person acts as sort of the owner of the infrastructure at the elementary schools, whereas it frees up Mark Merrifield or others to focus on other schools to give up? Because you said something confused me a little bit. You talked about shadowing around to learn, but yet the description is really specific to elementary. So I just want to make sure that the usage of this person is sort of like ownership. I mean, because a part-time person is what you would do if you want somebody just to troubleshoot the random problems when they occur, but somebody owns the building more holistically, like Mark or somebody. But if you're bringing a full-time person in, I would expect that person to take ownership of the building so that you don't have to bother the other building people to do that. So I'm just trying to be clear what the intent of this person really is.
Well, if the stated intent in Nancy's book is for elementary use, which is valid, I would still want that person to have experience in all of the schools, because computer technicians do take vacations. They are out sick. We try and build redundancy in our computer systems. I know in my office, if I have payroll person that is out for an extended time, I have someone else who can step in and muddle through the process with some help from our vendor. Same thing with accounts payable, same thing with a lot of things. And that redundancy is what keeps you going. So I would want to take that tech and get him familiar with this district. And if Nancy chooses that after that point, the best fit is elementary, I mean, that's her call, and those are her words, so that's what I would assume would be done.
All set? Ms. Guglielmi?
I hear what you're saying. I mean, it's at some point we're making a significant investment in the technology of our schools, and you need people to manage the technology. It's like having a truck with no one to drive it, you know. So, I mean, you get to the, you know, is this the point where we're at? And it sounds like it is, based on all sorts of things going on with the curriculum, as it relates to train the trainer, as personal development, as far as integrating technology in the classroom. And based on some of the several school board meetings we've had, there have been presentations where you just hear that there's this sense of people needing support to be able to get technology into the classrooms, in front of the students, and is part of the is part of the instruction. So I don't support removing that amount of money. It was the $79,675.
Any other comment? I'll share my comments, and they fall in line with Ms. Gualiumi's. I think, I don't think, I know that we have been understaffed in this regard for some time, right? Matt mentions the 5 or 6 years. We as a board have been committed to a technology plan which is doing a number of things, right? It's upgrading technology, and I agree with Vice Chair Barnes' assessment that by taking older, clunkier computers out of the classrooms and labs, that support can become easier. But I would contend that at the same time, we're introducing all sorts of new technology. We're expanding the wireless support. We're introducing iPads, laptops, Apple TVs, presentation monitors, et cetera. And I can tell you from firsthand experience in talking to educators that the challenge becomes when someone is overstretched in the ETI space, trying to fulfill 2 roles, they're not doing either one of them as well as they could or possibly should. And so if you look at the fact that we're talking about the system support for the entire district and naming individuals who are actually doing it to support, you know, the hundreds of employees and thousands of students in the district and their technology needs, and we're talking about 1-offs and 2-offs, I can assure you we're understaffed in this regard. So I'm also not supportive of removing this position. I think if we're serious about technology integration and supporting the technology plan, we need to truly support it and have someone on a day-to-day basis whose job that is. Vice Chair Barnes.
I've listened to everything you've said, and all I'm hearing more is that the need for education technology integrators more than it's a need for tech. I look at that, if they're doing the hybrid position as it is, and there are teachers that are trying to figure out how to plug in computers, change ink cartridges, and fix paper jams, amongst other things, within their day, then the question is 1 or 2 people across 6 buildings going to fix that? Where does it make more sense to have maybe not one ETI, but maybe, growing that area of the business, as you would say, having more people that can support teachers from a teacher's perspective versus having someone that will support machines from a technical perspective. So, a lot of the support I'm hearing sounds like we need more feet on the floor to help teachers become better technologists in the classroom, and that takes someone that understands both education and technology in my mind. So I was hearing a lot more of that. But yes, do we have systems that need support? Of course. But having people that are learning to do those smaller things and integrating technology into their lesson plans, well, that's someone that I think needs to also be an educator in my mind. So a computer technician, by definition to me, doesn't seem to fit that mindset. So that's where I looked at that and said, what's one person in 6 buildings going to do when you can have people that can do both technology and education, and expanding that role within buildings?
Did you have your hand up?
I think the examples that we provided probably weren't helpful, maybe because it seemed as if they were simple things that could easily be done. I think that the principals and Nancy Rose and just speaking for myself would say that we are well served by our ed tech integrators, and that they are actively in support of that educational integration, tech integration role, active supporters, and are very successful in that role. And their role is diminished every time they have to step away from that role to do any number of things. The examples that we gave, I grant you, are sort of simple fixes, which we've really begun to train our teachers to do on their own. But I can only tell you from boots on the ground experience, the complications that are arising and that have the potential to arise from our increased infrastructure and our increased needs to put those ETIs even more in that role up against the problems that a dedicated technician can address while they are continuing to do that role. That is just, it is absolutely a need that I would tell you from our experience that everyone is recognizing. So we're well served by our ETIs. The tech support end is where we're lacking.
Mr. Powell.
Well, I first of all want to say that I was really on the fence about this position to begin with, but in hearing the explanation of the position, I agree that we're at the point, the district is large enough, the infrastructure is large enough, that we need to be able to support it. I agree that contracting services is probably not the best answer, you know, and while I applaud Mr. Schneider for suggesting a part-time position, for all the reasons that Matt stated, I don't think you're going to get the buy-in. The only other thing that I wanted to say, Shannon, to address your point about needing more technology integrators, you brought up we need an educator in that position in order to teach the teachers how to work the equipment. And if I misunderstood you, I apologize, but I don't think an educator is needed to teach the teacher. I know computer technicians have taught me quite a bit, so it's not, I guess what I'm trying to get at is there doesn't have to be an educational background there to be in the support without being able to show somebody how to NGM a printer, for example.
And my point was that an ETI would be better equipped to integrate technology into a lesson plan. So where a technician wouldn't understand the lesson plan portion.
If I may.
Yeah.
But I don't think that was part of the job description that they're proposing.
Correct.
Yeah, I think what Vice Chair Barnes was saying
I'm sorry.
was that as the nature of the discussion went on, what was being conveyed, and Dr. McLaughlin clarified that perhaps the examples given were not illustrative, but what she was hearing was that the troubleshooting wasn't really the major need. It was what the ETIs are tasked to do. What Dr. McLaughlin explained was that we're sufficiently staffed for the ETIs to do what they're doing if they didn't have to do all of these other administrative tasks. We've been describing it as help desk type tasks, right? Unjam a printer, my computer can't connect to the network. But I think it goes beyond that in terms of some systems administration and you know, software upgrades and things beyond just help me unclog my printer. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. If I can, you know, we spend a lot of times. Sometimes, you know, there are programs that come in on whatever you call them, these little discs, the USB sticks that people can bring from home, and they invite viruses into our system. And a computer technician is more capable of taking care of removing a virus and may have more rights and privileges to go into the dark depths of some of our network to bring out those tools and do it, whereas we don't really need the ETIs to be well versed in that area. That's not their area of expertise. We need them to work with the teachers. And the whole part of the thing is to free up their time from doing the mundane tasks and those that aren't that mundane, so they could do what their role description is. It's almost like, do you want more ETIs to do technical technician work and pay them $40 an hour, or do you want to pay a technician $20 an hour to do technician work? You
Mr. Schneider.
So as is my normal routine, my initial line of questioning was to sort of raise the questions about what the intent of the position truly was. I mean, we saw from Nancy's description what it was, but I wanted to get the insight there. My question about part-time wasn't that I was suggesting it, rather, but to see whether it was investigated, to sort of poke at what was really needed. Now, just for clarity, I mean, I happen to be married to a woman who has a master's degree in technology integration and is a technology leader in her district. And while the technology integrators understand the technology integration and everything, there needs to be somebody on site to handle when the wireless router goes down, when the closet where all the connectors stops working, when all of a sudden somebody's Microsoft desktop or whatever it happens to be doesn't work, or when Google goes belly up and you can't do Google Docs for a share in a room. And while the ETIs may or may not have the ability to do that work, depending on their knowledge level, you need to have a buck stop here person. If we have a shortage of people in the district that are resources that can be brought in, then we need to bring some additional resources to make that happen. I believe that the reason why I was glad to hear him say no to part-time, it's because I believe the district is trying to invest in somebody that can know the buildings. I'm hoping that what's correct is, even though they may shadow for a while, that they have ownership of the elementary buildings, because it seems like that's lacking. And I know that the teachers will probably say having somebody they can count on that can go right in the building and know exactly where the problem is the most important part of this. So after all my line of questioning and hearing this, I would not support the removal, knowing what I know about what this position does in the state. So.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Seeing none, we'll put the motion to a vote. The motion was to remove across multiple line items the salary and associated costs for the computer technician position in the total amount of $79,675. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? I'm sorry, Mr. Powell, I missed your hand. You're opposed? Okay. So the motion fails 0-5-0 with Board Members Gualiumi, Board Member Schneider, Board Member Powell, Vice Chair Barnes, and Chair Ortega in opposition. Interesting discussion. Are there any other motions associated with the budget? Mr. Powell.
I'm going to try this a couple different ways. We'll see which one sticks. Still on the high school, page 9, line item 100-2725-20-8519-31, the co-curricular transportation for the high school. I move that we increase that line by $11,170 for a total of $55,848.
Do you mind repeating that?
Reduce it, increase it by $11,170 for a new total of $55,848.
Okay. Is there a second?
Okay, I'm going to second it, but I think he may have misstated. So let's talk through it and then see.
Seconding for discussion. Okay, speak to it, Mr. Powell,
What
please.
did I mistake?
Go ahead, state it, and I'll tell you whether I agree or not. Go ahead.
Boy, I'm just getting it from both sides tonight. We had the discussion about getting parity regarding the co-curriculars. And I stated this before when we were talking with the high school administration. While I appreciate their effort to bring this up on a level, we're either all in or we're all out, or we're not. And I don't think funding it partially is the answer. So if you're telling me that I did my math wrong, I wouldn't disagree. But this would add in the extra 25% to bring it up to what the rolling 3 years of 100% would be.
Okay, Mr. Schneider.
So I believe what you really wanted to say was instead of the proposed budgeted amount of 33,000, you wanted to have the budget amount of the full amount of 44,678.
Oh, you're right. Okay. Let's start all over.
I removed my second.
Okay,
If he's going to restate.
So I got to change that whole number.
See, that was
Yeah, I
33,
was
and
looking
that's-
down here.
just
Yep,
use
you're
the
right.
right number.
Why didn't you tell me that before I said something?
you wouldn't let him?
I looked at him and he said, "Oh, wait." Beavis and Butthead here. Minus 33. 11. Okay, so the number's still close. The same line, I'm not going to repeat it. Increase it by $11,678 to bring us to a new total of $44,678
Seconded by Mr. Schneider.
for all the reasons before.
Okay, discussion. Mr. Schneider, and then Vice Chair.
So when we had the discussion, seems like weeks ago, but I'm sure it was just last week when we talked about this. I know that I made a big deal out of stepping up and funding 100% of co-curricular the way that we do for athletics. But I also know that in the discussion, it was a little bit of apples and oranges because some of this transportation is things that are long distance, plane flight information, plane flight content and things like that, that I thought that we had an action to work as a board to understand what a proper funding method for all of our stuff was going to be. It was like, let's note that this is problematic, and then let's look at it when we outside of budget time to see what the right thing to do is. So my thought was to leave this as is, but put us, the board, on the spot to resolving this before we hit next budget cycle. So my proposal would be to leave it as it is, but take our responsibility of doing what we sort of talked about.
Okay, Vice Chair Barnes.
First and foremost, I think that Davis's motion doesn't do the job based upon some of the discussion we had. I think Chris's example of the Science Olympiad and how the numbers for travel don't even come close to what was put in the budget because we don't have, and it's not for lack of transparency, is that the district doesn't have the actual numbers that the families incur. So to be fair, it's not that Mr. Johnson was keeping it from us, it's that it wasn't there for us to have. That being said, I was tasked to go to Concord on Saturday for the New Hampshire School Boards Association and did my due diligence, and although we have very little time to discuss with other districts, I did grab a couple of them, and no one funds co-curriculars at 100% for national competition. One of the districts, I'm not going to specify the districts because I don't want to put them on the spot with their constituency on record. One actually takes a 5-year plan to build any credibility with the district. So the first year, if you're interested in robotics, I'm just going to use that as an example. The first year, you just don't get anything except, good luck with that. The second year, you get 20%. Third year, you get 40%, and onward and upward. But when it comes to national events, they fundraise. Everyone fundraises for national events. That being said, I went in with the presumption that, just like, our school, I'm sure your school does 100% funding for sports, and therefore the co-curriculars are slighted. And they're like, we don't fund 100% for sports. And they're not just talking about jackets and award ceremonies. They're talking about the floors of the gymnasium that they are fundraising as parents because the sports program means so much to some of these other towns that they find that it is an investment in their community culture. And the district cannot afford to fund it, so they fund it themselves. One was a middle school gymnasium floor that needed to be replaced. It was not done with district funding. So it was done with grassroots fundraising. So I think when it comes to Merrimack, we're a large community with a broad base, and we're assuming we're roughing it. And when you sit in the room with some of the schools like Berlin and Colebrook and Rochester and Raymond, Winchester, areas that don't have big pockets to pull from, being corporate partners like Budweiser and PC Connection and Brookstone. I'll use that because my husband's there. But when you talk about that, we're a little spoiled as a district. I'm not saying that taxes aren't hard on us, because the cost of living is also harder in our communities. But the well to which they can tap in the state as a general consensus is not what we're used to seeing locally, because we're close enough to big tech markets that we're living a different lifestyle. So I tried to get you the right answer, but I think it's a bigger picture. But not one can say that they 100% fund co-curricular for national competition.
Thank you. Is there further comment? Mr. Powell.
Well, this is Merrimack. Not to sound mean, I don't care what other school districts do. Just because other school districts don't fund 100% doesn't mean that we can't fund 100%. Just because other districts don't fund athletic programs at 100% doesn't mean that we shouldn't fund it at 100%. Is that what you're proposing, is to cut it back?
No, I was asked when I went to the New Hampshire School Boards Association to come back with some information about what other districts do, and I gave it to you.
So this is the discussion regarding Merrimack. I appreciate the information that came back from other districts to give us a basis. But I still feel, and I wasn't insinuating that Principal Johnson was keeping any of the funding back or anything. I'm just simply making the point that I appreciate his effort to start bringing it to parity, but I think the board needs to take a stand that we're either going to fund all of it or we're not going to fund any of it. And that's where it needs to be. As far as fundraisers, there's a lot on these kids as it is. We don't ask athletic department to fundraise for their transportation. I don't see why we should have to ask the co-curriculars to do the same thing. I understand the issue that you brought up regarding, there's no real true figure for the Science Olympiad, for example. And yeah, that is something that needs to be challenged. But this is, the first journey starts with a step, or the journey starts with the first step, rather. This, I feel, is the first step.
Thank you. Ms. Guayumi.
I just wanted to say that I was comfortable with the approach that we discussed last week, which was to maybe a little daily dollars short for this budget. Those are my own words, but obviously, but that to revisit it when we have some time to collect some data, to look at where we can get parity and what makes sense as we try to compare apples to oranges makes the most sense for me. So it's not that I do agree there are a lack of parity between how we support both of those, the athletics and the co-curriculars, but I don't feel right now is the time to try to make an adjustment before I have all the data and the facts.
Thank you. Mr. Schneider.
Yeah, just really quick, I think it needs to be stated that in general we fund the local events similarly between co-curriculars we do for athletics. What's the difference are the events that cause a dramatic travel that needs to occur. And I'm not sure we have anything equivalent in athletics where you fly a basketball team to someplace in Ohio or something. So that's why, while I was tempted when I first saw the budget to do exactly what the motion was, I think we need to take a step back and say what's the right approach for us to do. Pick an approach and then put that into the budget process next time. So that's.
Mr. Powell.
To expand upon your point, to clarify, the list that we have in front of us shows local events as well as the long distance events. So the amount that they're asking for includes all the local transportation as well, not just the national transportation.
Right, but we're funding, but the total amount, which includes a mix of long distance and local, is the 44,000.
Right.
But they're funding at 33, so it's not as though we're not getting anything. So.
No. Yeah. No, I understand that. It just goes back to.
No, I know. I just think that it's more than just a budgeting exercise. It's a philosophy exercise that we have to take on. So.
Is there further discussion on the topic? I just want to say I am glad we had and continue to have this discussion. We've talked about the fact that our goal has been to see it increase each year. I will admit that I never thought that we as a district could fully fund the travel associated with these national clubs. What I wanted to see was more parity between what we spend on local athletic transportation, because that said, I still think we're paying less per participant in these events than we are for athletic events. And so the methodology that we reference, I think, is very important, right? We need to look at athletics, understand how many students are participating, how much we're spending on that, and if we're being fair, what are we then spending on these co-curriculars? Are we matching that amount? Are we matching that amount per participant? I think the reality in the district is there is fundraising that takes place for a number of things. I agree with you. I don't want to be like Berlin and have the boosters replace a gym floor. But I think to also recognize that there needs to be some form of boosters to support some of those additional things that the district isn't willing to take on, I think makes perfect sense. And I would hope as well that for the co-curriculars, these academic clubs, that when they have postseason success, that the amount that they have to fundraise is lower as well, so that they can attend and we can take care of students in financial need. It's a good conversation for us to be having, and I like the fact that, you know, we're continuing to move the ball. The budget for this line item increased 10% this year. What's the right number? I don't know, but I don't believe it's the 44,000 either. And so I think as a board, if we commit to the process and having a good methodology and philosophy for what it is we want to fund and why we want to fund it, that would be a worthwhile endeavor. And so everyone at the table, I think, has the right intent. We're just questioning each other on what comes first. So with that, we will put the motion to a vote. The motion was related to co-curricular transportation, MHS 100-272520-8519-31, and it was to increase the line item of 33,000 by 11,678 to 44,678. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? So that motion fails with board members fails 1-4-0 with board members Guglielmi, Schneider, and Vice Chair Barnes and Chair Ortega in opposition. Vice Chair Barnes.
I'd like to have some compromise on this. I would like to move the same line item, which is 100-2725-20-8519-31, from 33,000 to 36,000.
Thank you. Is there seconded by Ms. Guglielmi?
And it's a very simple reason. We didn't do any increases in co-curricular funding last year. It was a flat line. So I would prefer to make up for last year's non-increase by the exact amount that we have for this year's increase, just to keep what you would call that
Momentum.
that momentum. Thank you, momentum.
Discussion. I will say that it's hard to argue with your logic based on everything that we've said in terms of the intent of the board and the fact that we didn't make progress on it last year, and so I would be willing to support the motion. Is there further discussion? Ms. Guglielmi.
I agree. I think that is a fair compromise, and I thank you for putting that on the table.
Mr. Powell.
I appreciate you offering up that, and I did not look at the previous budget in that regard, to be honest with you, I was just looking at the fixed number for this, and I think that's a great compromise to keep the momentum going.
Further discussion? Seeing none, we'll put the motion to a vote. The motion is to increase 100-2725-20-8519-31 co-curricular transportation MHS from $33,000 to $36,000. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. The motion carries 5-0-0. Are there any other motions related to the 2015-2016 proposed budget? I think you might have been first. Mr. Schneider.
No, I'd like you to go first. Unless you can make it Schneider.
I'd like to propose that we move the budget with a modified total of $70,393,919 to the warrant.
I have a different number.
You did? Okay. I lost
So
my way.
the number, were you going to amend it, or you wanted him?
I just wanted to have a quick discussion before we did anything to move the whole budget forward, because I thought
Okay.
we're still in the minutia.
Yeah, so
If you
before,
wouldn't mind.
yeah,
Okay.
so,
I withdraw my motion.
okay, and we'll double check math. Just over in the corner there, I've got 70,397,669 as my running
And we
total.
I've got 70,430,54.
Okay.
We lost the gimbal light.
Yeah, what do you have, Mark?
70,393,919.
Oh, wow.
Because we had to, we subtracted all the money and the last thing we added back on.
3,000.
Or we reduced the cut by $3,000. Because if I remember right, we took away $740,448.
Well, actually, I was going to ask for a review of all the motions
okay.
and the amounts and their subsequent
Good point.
totals.
Can I have my discussion?
Yeah, so why don't, while that gets prepared, why don't we hear from Vice Chair Barnes?
Okay, I just feel, the one thing I wanted to talk about was the track. It's we've circled it, we've talked about it, but we haven't vetted it in a budgetary sense. The one thing we talked about was, is it really going to be competition ready with a $10,000 or $15,000 increase? And, you know, obviously when you talk about what we've seen, is it ready to take on, students with only a $15,000 improvement based on what we've seen? And I have doubts, I'm not gonna lie, there was quite a bit of, you know, areas of concern on that track. In the same token, I think if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it right. And thirdly, I'd hate to think that, this is not an operating budget item. Honestly, you know, there's always talk about, well, what about petition warrant article, those kind of things. And I look at that and say, well, the safety of the students is first and foremost our priority. So I'm not ready to make a motion, but I feel that's something we need to discuss because we've discussed it so much, but not discussed it on where it belongs in this budget, if at all. And, you know, based on what we're getting, is a $15,000 repair going to be enough? That being said, I don't know that we put $15,000 in this budget to make said repairs. So we haven't done anything with this track. And before we put a budget forward, I want to make sure we're ready to do so. But this, I mean, I have such concern that, you know, it was brought to our attention and brought to then the district's attention. And that's how this track even got the light of day, you know, and its concerns brought. You know, we're doing a lot in the very 11th hour to find out what the right thing to do, short-term and long-term is. And that's a lot of money we're talking about. It's $429,000 to do it right. And I honestly, I say doing it right because an 8-lane track, to me, is doing it right because it gives us long-term growth in that program and with the state. So from everything we're hearing, it's the way to go. Am I 100% comfortable with waiting a year to do that? I'm not. Am I 100% comfortable with putting $429,000 in the budget to get this project done in 15-16? I'm not. But I want to talk to you guys about it before we actually go and bring a budget forth. So that and the $15,000 if that's where we want to go as well.
It's a great point. Mr. Schneider?
So if you remember last week when the athletic director was here and Ken Johnson was here, as well as the track coach was here, I asked the question, do you believe that the track can exist another year with proper funding for repairs and be safe and be something that we can compete with under the current guidelines during next year? And I heard a clear answer from both of them saying yes. And I also asked them, if we had to make this hard decision, as Shannon just identified, do you want a 6-lane track this year or an 8-lane track the following year, knowing the budgeting constraints? I also heard a fairly clear, we want the 8-lane track for the long-term viability, and that because of if you fund the repairs properly, which we certainly haven't done yet in this budget, that's absolutely right, that they felt, in their opinion, and they're the athletic director and the track coach that live with this a heck of a lot more than any of the rest of us do every day. And then hearing from Tom that the estimate from the track company was $10,000, but he would feel more comfortable with $15,000. That once we get done with discussion, that somebody on the board, and I'll volunteer to do it, should make a motion to add $15,000 to the district-wide maintenance and upkeep line item to handle the repairs for this explicitly, not put it into an emergency, put it in there to handle this when it comes up. So I understand what Shannon is saying about it's a very difficult choice, because it is. I mean, you want to do the right thing, you want to keep it safe, which is why we've kept poking so hard over the last month or 2 months, because we took tours and everything, about can the repair be viable? Can you do the repair to give us another year? Because I talked earlier in the discussion about looking at the CIP. We haven't talked about the CIP at all. But when you move the heat wheel out, and if you move the paving out, for example, and not the roof, and you increase the cost of the track in next year's budget, you have a similar amount of CIP funding or CIP expense next year that you do this year, if you do that sort of a thing. And we haven't even begun to talk about some of the other warrant articles, for example, the SAU sped building. We haven't even talked about that yet and what that means. So for me, I think to try to keep the CIP plan full and keep our safety, this is something that I could support with the intent of what we should do in a CIP in following years. So.
Okay. Further discussion? Okay. Is there a motion then? Mr. Schneider?
So I move, now I want to, so Matt, Mr. Chevino.
Yes, sir.
Based on what I thought I remember, there is an account within the district-wide, or the maintenance budget, where track repairs are kept. Do you know which one that is? Is it the maintenance upkeep building servers repair, or is it a different one?
I got it,
So do you, which one?
page 4 in the maintenance budget. Bottom one.
Maintenance ground repair. Okay.
30-408432-08.
Right. Funds to repair playground equipment and sports equipment, swing seats, change, bleachers, soccer goals, outside basketball courts. It doesn't talk about track explicitly on this one, but I'm assuming that's where it would go. Because I know that there's some track repair that they keep track of occasionally.
Are you sure it's not bonus supplies?
That's supplies. Is it 610?
It just says track.
Is it a 610 account?
Yeah.
Then it wouldn't be that. It would be where the grounds. Yeah.
So I think we've got the right account, Mr. Schneider.
Okay, assuming that's the right account, then I propose that we add $15,000 to the maintenance grounds repair account 100-2630-40-8432-08, for the intent of having funds available to do safety repairs to the track during the next year, based on our decision to not put the track in this year's budget.
Is there a second made by Ms. Guagliumi? Discussion? No? You're good? Vice Chair Barnes?
Well, since I started, I might as well wrap it up. I said the only concern that really alarmed me about this whole process was this is one that was brought to our attention and not, it didn't, our students were on it by the time we knew the problem existed. And so, the one thing, we always say we have to make for better for next year. So we have to. I mean, especially when students are on the ground and on the front lines in these areas, that there's no surprises brought to us by them. And it was bad. I'm not going to say that it's, we pulled up large pieces of track and could put it back down. It was missed. And we just want to make sure that, we do for better next year. This is a lesson we need to learn as a board. Obviously we'll learn everything we learn as a district because, it's the bigger picture. But, when we get this kind of feedback, we definitely need to vet it to the fullest extent. But, Tom's always been fantastic about telling us about our roofs and stuff. But when it came to this, we missed something. And I just hope we can, learn from this and not have this conversation again next year with something else. So it's there. But this is not, I think, our best decision. I think the best decision would be to get the track done, but it's the most fiscally responsible one with the timeline that we have. And for that reason, I will support it.
Thank you. This job is all about not making the best decisions, right? The best decision would be to do the heat wheel. The best decision would be to do a number of the things that we've moved and cut from this year's budget. But I do want to say that the board and others took this concern quite seriously. We had on the capital improvement plan for next year an item to do the track replacement. And with the information that we received, I think all 5 board members walked the track, examined it, some multiple times, and seriously considered, Mr. Schneider mentioned the various meetings that we've held on the topic, and even are committed to taking the item that was on our capital improvement plan for $200,000, which assumed a 6-lane track, and the more that we dug into it, are really committed to doing one that is going to hold us in good stead for the future, which is an 8-lane track for $430,000. The question is really one of timing, and with the assurances on safety, with the attention that I think has been paid to it, I'm confident that we'll be able to ensure that the students running on that track next year have it sufficiently patched. It's obviously very, very important. So I too support the motion and regret that we can't do everything that we wish we could, while also being responsible. So with that, we'll put the motion to a vote. The motion is to add $15,000 for the purpose of track repair to the account 100-2630-40-8432-08, which will bring that total amount budgeted to $42,500. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. That motion carries 5-0-0. Are there any other motions related to the 2015-2016 operating budget? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to item 6 on the agenda, which is the approval of the 2015-2016 school district budget. And I'm hoping that through our discussion, we've had a chance to tally the various motions and amounts. Okay, All right. Seeing as we might need a little more time to catch up with all of our action here, I'll move to item number 7, which is warrant article discussion. We have, as a deadline, as a district, until February 2nd to move our warrant articles. We've talked about a number of items that are in various states of perhaps readiness. I'll run through the list of items and talk about where each of them are, and then perhaps what the appropriate next steps and timing are on each. So as Board Member Schneider mentioned, one of the items for consideration is the Consolidated SAU Special Education Office. I don't know that as we speak, but earlier this evening, the Planning and Building Committee was working on finalizing their report based upon our charge to update the Planning and Building report, incorporating information from the NESDEC report to bring it more current so that we would have a readout. And that's planned for our meeting next Tuesday. We will have that delivered to us. And so at this point, it would seem premature to consider a warrant for that. Additionally, we've talked about 2 related items, and we touched on those tonight. One is to take the asbestos abatement capital reserve fund, which has, I forget the exact balance, but to retire that fund and for the purposes of enhancing the emergency repair fund, which we drew $100,000 from in order to replace the bleachers that were failing. We talked about 2 warrants, one to retire the asbestos abatement fund because that work is largely completed and has been taken up under the operating budgets, and to have a complementary warrant article to enhance the emergency repair fund by the same amount. And so this one seems to me as if, at the very least, we could get the language started on those 2 articles and, to review by the attorneys so that we have something that we can work with. And then also we will need at some point, hopefully soon, to get the details of an agreed-to MESA contract, which is currently under negotiation. Are there any other warrant articles that I have missed that are of interest to the board? No? Okay.
So it would be my intent to have prepared for you everything except for what you're going to do relative to the consolidation of the 2 buildings, and have that before you on February 2nd, with the idea that it would go in your packet, and it would just need to be approved that night, because then we go to the Budget Committee on the 3rd. So if you have that ahead of time, is that appropriate? Now, there'll also be the housekeeping one, too, so
Right.
we'll just order those up. Yes?
Does that work for everyone?
Okay.
Yeah?
Perfect. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Thank you. And so are we in good stead to do a review of all the motions associated with the budget and have a running tally?
Mark and I have conferred. I had a little Apple computer difficulty here, which I won't bring with me anymore. We're looking at a bottom line of $70,408,919.
Say that again, Matt?
$70,408,919.
Do you mind if I just ask you to recap each of the motions and the net increase or decrease
Okay.
as a summary, if that would be
I'll
okay?
do it as a summary, yeah.
Yeah.
I've got, first off, we started out with 68,426, 729. Well, we started out with, that's the general fund operating budget. We subtracted 740, 4048.
No. The proposed budget is 71,252,545.
Yeah, I know, but what I'm reading is the general fund budget. I wasn't reading the. Yeah, I know.
Oh, I know what you were doing. You were,
You add
Because
that
it was
plus
all
food
coming-
service
or-
plus
yeah.
federal funds, and then you get the 71, whatever it was, and I was just doing it off general fund. So whatever it is in the book, 71, 252, 545. Let me do this on a separate thing. 71, what we got? 252, 545. Okay. Then I have a motion that reduces the budget by 740,448. That correct? Minus 740, 448. I have a motion that reduces the budget by 97,493. That correct? 97,493. Then I have a $750, $37.50. I'm just breaking it out. 750 and 3,000, so it's 3750.
that was for the,
Shredder
The
and
Shredder and the periodicals and the
periodicals.
library.
periodicals.
yeah.
Okay. Next, I have a reduction of $9,135.
Mhm.
Is that correct? Then I have a reduction of $4,400. Then I have a reduction of $6,400. Then I have an addition of $3,000. Then I have an addition of $15,000. And that brings me to $74,008,919 total.
Which, just,
Yes.
just so folks know that our actions tonight, since we started till now, we reduced the proposed budget by $843,626 with all of our cuts. And it brought it, as Cindy said, below default, which was a goal as well, so.
Excellent. Okay, so the proposed budget stands at $70,408,919. Do I have a motion to approve the 2015-2016 school district budget? Mr. Schneider, is there a second? Made promptly by two members, Vice Chair Barnes and Ms. Walyumi. It was a dead tie. Do you want to speak to your motion, Mr. Schneider?
Yeah, obviously, we went through a lot of detail tonight. I know that the proposed budget, there was a request that we had from a board to have different tiers of cuts. The administration did an excellent job in providing us a lot of the detail here. Some of the cuts were more straightforward. Others, as you can tell, were more difficult, and we found a couple cases where we needed to add. I think that given where we're at with the budget and the obligations that we've got. I think that this is a responsible budget, given what we have to work with. I think it allows us to be able to do what we need to do in the district while deferring things that make fiscal sense. Some were harder than others, as we've discussed. And I'd also like to remind people that if we compare this last year's budget that was approved by all the boards and approved by the voters was $68,869,880, and this new budget is $70,408,000. So that's approximately $1.6 million more? Am I doing that math right?
1.5,
1.6 million higher.
Yep.
2.2% overall increase, given we started at 3.48, I believe, when we started the night. I would have liked to have been closer, but I think that this is about what we need to support to do what we need to do in the district. So,
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Ms. Gualiumi.
Thank you, Andy, for those calculations. I'd also like to thank administration for coming back to us with the tiered proposed cuts. Although we didn't take them in a package, it did help us understand your perspective on priority. The other thing I'd like to say is I've been watching these budget discussions and participating in them over the last several years on the budget committee and now the school board. And last week's discussions with the leadership team, I thought the entire leadership team did a really good job of presenting to us. And I think it really helped. I don't know if there's ever been so many questions presented ahead of time, but it really seemed to me that they were able to batch the questions that we provided as a board and be able to come back with some really concise presentations regarding their budget. So I'd like to pass along my thankfulness on that and for all of the work that you all have put into the budget and preparing it for us. And now as it continues its process on its way to the budget committee and the deliberative session, and then to the voters for their vote in the upcoming weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gualiumi. Is there further discussion? Very well said, both of you. I couldn't agree more. So with that, we will put the motion to a vote to approve the 2015-2016 school district budget in the amount of $70,408,919. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. The motion carries 5-0-0. Which takes us now to item number 8 on our agenda, since we skipped to warrant articles, which is public participation on agenda items. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address the board? Seeing none, we'll close public participation, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Made by Vice Chair Barnes, seconded by Mr. Schneider. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None. The motion carries 5-0-0. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
And that's why I wanted to touch. I just didn't want to ignore it.
No, it was definitely a big thing as far as team chemistry goes. And hey, let's hope that he's never had that much youth to have to deal with.
Yeah.
Look at all the talented, but youth.
You're
It's
right.
always
No, because
got-
And he
Really?
shouldn't have to be dealing with it.
And to your point, I mean, you were way ahead of this last week. Absolutely.
Are we
This is
gonna
what
hear
it
this
fell
for
into this
16
week, you
weeks?
know?
No, but I
Okay.
think that it's fair to say that I think that they kind of did him a disservice. He's not at a point where he wants to be babysitting kids. He wants to be, and it's got to make him so frustrated watching Denver and Peyton do what every quarterback has so many weapons around him, and he has literally nothing.
Yeah.
And no running game at the moment.
Yeah, I know.
He well said.
And I got to say, though, I never ever thought I would hear Tom Brady compared to John Lackey. I like that one.
It's unique.